And let's roll on to our next slide, please. All right, we're on to topic number 2. I'd like to thank Mark Daynes from Beyond Systems. Mark is a fellow Oracle ACE. He's an Oracle Certified Specialist, Professional, and Scrum Master. Been working with the Oracle technology stack for well over 30 years. And just, I think, a great guy. I've enjoyed my conversations with Mark over the past year or two that I've gotten to know him. Mark, thank you for coming in and talking to us about Oracle Spatial Studio. Visualize, analyze, and share. Take over control.
Hopefully you can see that.
You're sharing your screen yet? Not yet.
Yes.
There we go. Awesome.
That looks better.
Right. Excellent. Right. Thank you so much, Wayne. That's an undeserved introduction. I really appreciate that. The session I thought from I think Derek, Chris, and Tim was really excellent. Look at all the sort of the data cleansing and creating your own shape files. And something I think that Tim said there about the use of Spatial Studio to develop a methodology, which they then took forward to use in some other tools. And I think that's what we're going to look at here as well, and take some of that on board. So let's have a quick. Well, I think the introduction that Wayne gave was pretty good for me. So that's don't need to dwell on that. I work for a company called Beyond Systems in the UK. We're an Oracle Modern partner, specifically looking at analytics, Oracle Analytics, but also sort of spatial and graph as well. We do quite a bit of work in that field over the last 15 years. We've created a couple of products that work within the Oracle Cloud and the Oracle Stack to help local authorities in the UK to do certain things, and also to help with the analytic optimization and the optimization of all the cloud usage that they have. So moving on, why Spatial Studio? Now my interest was really sort of peaked a couple of years ago when it was first released, because the Oracle database itself has got a lot of spatial capability, but it's also there's quite a lot of it. There's quite a lot of syntax to kind of get your head around to use it. And I found that Spatial Studio was a great GUI, being able to accelerate some of the things that we were doing as a company, to be able to get a fast move on with how that worked, and get out to some customers and show them how they can bring some of their data on and look at it in a spatial way. So it's currently on version 21.3. In terms of actually running it as a product, it can run in multiple different ways, either locally on premises. There's a nice little quick start thing. It's downloadable from the Oracle website. You can run it for the marketplace, and also runs as an embedded Java enterprise. So you can stick it to something like WebLogic or something to run it like that. So some of the questions that we kind of get asked are things like, where are my local providers where are my providers within a certain radius? So if I've got, say, I've got a building site somewhere, and I've got some suppliers, which are the closest that do this, and how many are within that sort of a radius? And let me do some overlays of different sorts of things. So I could say I can overlay different sorts of data sets on top of that, and that's where I think Spatial Studio excels in giving you that sort of capability. So what I wanted to do is look at a couple of scenarios here. I've done it as a bit of sort of a fluffy one. So look, the data sets are quite straightforward and simple, but hopefully that'll help us understand it in an easy to do manner. So Scampi, there's happens to be a small dog, has opened some flying schools around the UK, but he's got a lot of spatial questions to ask about that. So he wants to look at all the data that he's got on his flying schools. He wants to look at his customers, where his customers are in relation to where the flying schools are, how many people go in there, how much are they sort of spending, and then be able to sort of ring fence a certain number of those people and then give them a special offer. Now, thinking about how to do that, say in sort of SQL or something like that, can be a bit tricky. What we're going to do here quite quickly is try and answer some of those questions. And then, as well as doing that with the Spatial Studio, we're going to use the results of our Spatial Studio analysis and pass some of that back off onto a couple of Oracle tools. One being Apex, where we've got an example of spatial data working within Oracle Apex. So we're going to use Spatial Studio to geocode some data, to ring fence it, to take it, to store it away in an autonomous warehouse, and then to ingest that into an Oracle Apex application and have a bit of a play with that. And we're also going to do the kind of the same sort of thing, but in Oracle Analytics Cloud. So we can look at it in a couple of different ways. So let's just have a little bit of the source data. So the source data we've got that we're going to geocode and look at is relatively straightforward. One is about the customers. So we've got a whole bunch of customers here. And I've got just the information about them is just an ID, a postcode, a country. They're all in the same country, they're all in the UK. The amount that they've spent and the date of the flight. So these are the people who've taken a flight with Scampi's flight schools in different locations around the UK and just how much they've spent doing that. So that's one data set. The other data set is merely the airfields that we're using. So these are the airfields that we've got and that we're taking flights from. So we could start to look at these two layers and play with these layers in Spatial Studio to do some spatial analysis with this data. So let's start by signing in. Signing in, pretty straightforward. And what's really nice about it is it gives us a getting started. So if you're new to the tool, it's got some sort of great road path thing into getting you going. Because pretty much the only things you really need to do are these step 1, step 2, step 3, which is create a connection to where your data is, create a data set, and then start to use that data set within a project, and then start to build that out by adding more data sets to the project and seeing how those layers can interact. So we've got a little bit, there's some brand management as well. So if you look behind it, here I've just branded it up by loading up our little logo on there, so we could just brand the process up as well. So sort of a nice sort of thing. But let's go and do some of this. Let's actually go and get into it and start to do some sort of spatial analysis. So I'll skip over creating a connection because I think we can all create a connection to a database, and it's a relatively straightforward project thing for every sort of product. But the first thing we're then really going to do is, once we've created that, is we'll go and create a data set. So what I'm going to do as a first data set is I'm actually going to bring in a shape file. So just like I think like Tim, Chris, and Derek were looking at shape files, I've got a shape file that's already been created. So it's a matter of just sort of clicking into import a shape file. And this one's come from the UK government. It's from the Office of National Statistics, which I think is a great shape file, which is like the counties in the United Kingdom. So I've got Northern Ireland, I've got the North East, Southwest, different counties. So it's interesting. I'm going to use that as the backdrop of everything. Yeah. So I'm going to load this up as a shape file. And when I do that, it gives me all the information. So it shows all the different sort of the descriptions, the lat longs and the shapes within there. So you can see I've got the northeast and northwest from the shape file. So I haven't created the shape file. I'm using the existing one. I just load that shape file up, and it creates this thing I called it Scampi Plains UK data set. The only one thing that really it needs once I've loaded it up is it'll show me that here there's a little sort of warning triangle. So whenever I can see a warning triangle, it means there's something that needs doing. But in Spatial Studio, it'll guide you. You just click on it, and it'll guide you to actually what the problem is or what the issue is. So it just needs to tell me what's the key column. So with the key column for this data here is just the object ID. So all I'm going to do here is flag the object ID as being the key column, and then it'll that issue will go away here. So I've got this Scampi Plains UK DS, my new data set for the shape file for the background, and that icon there is showing me that it's fully valid for me to use it. So all I've got to do is right click on this side here, and I can create a project. So quite quickly, there's my project. It creates a default project, and it's brought my data set in to the project. So there's one data set in the project. It defaults to the West Coast of the US. And all I do is I just drag that data set across, and it automatically refocuses it and puts it on the map. So here's my data set, my first data set in my first project. And that's the whole of the UK. Now that's an interactive, because it's a shapefile, it's an interactive shapefile. So I can click on it anywhere and it'll highlight that area that I clicked in. So what I can start to do is start to make some sort of considerations about, say, where my customers are into the southwest of the UK. So what I'll do is start to load the data. I'm going to load that data up now. So if you remember, the actual data sets we've got of the customers are one of the customers and then one of the offices. So we'll start by loading up the customers first, and then seeing the customers in Spatial Studio. So as before, I'll go and create a data set. This time I'm going to go and click on the source of my data set. It's going to be from my autonomous warehouse. I've got the table already, just in the table before, called Scampy Plains Customers, and I'm going to bring that data here. I'm going to call it a different name, slightly different name to the one it is in the autonomous warehouse. So my data set, I'm just going to put underscore DS on it. So I'm going to have Scampy Plains Customers DS, which are all my customers within the UK. Now that's going to give me a little issue because it says there's two things wrong with this. I've brought this data set in. One, my table hasn't got the primary key on it. Now, if I had created the tables with primary keys, it would have recognized that, stamped with the primary key. But the second thing is, of course, it's saying there's no spatial data on this table. All I've got here is a country name and a postcode. But Spatial Studio can handle all of this, sort all of this out for me, which is quite useful, because I find that a lot of customers we work with don't have lat and long sort of data. They've got the data is more akin to like an ERP system where they've got an address rather than any sort of geolocated data. So the first thing I'll go and do is just highlight which column, which is the customer ID. So I've got and the tool itself is showing me the range of the number of data elements I've got there. So I've got 1,000 customers here. I'm going to go and flag that as being the key column. The tool itself says, well, actually that key is valid, so absolutely everything's fine with that. So that's great. The second thing I need to do is just geocode that data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the country to be that's been the United Kingdom as the country column. Then I'm going to just toggle the postcode to be the postcode column. And that's all I need to do. I can apply that then, and that'll start to geocode that data. And it does that relatively quickly. And I'll see the status there. It's saying geocoding's all been done. So I've now got a geocoded data. So what that's actually done is, when it's done the geocoding, it's gone and stamped on the table, and I've just created this table back in my autonomous warehouse, which is my source data. It's added a column to it. So it's added the geometry column onto it. If I expand that out, you can see that it's created that's sort of the definition of the geometry column. So it's created it as a lat long column, and that's put that back into the database. So it's interesting to go back and have a look at that. So already I could go and use that somewhere else anyway. Yeah, and I've just got Spatial Studio just to geocode, just to do sort of the geocoding for me. I could go and use that already. I don't really need to go any further with that if that's all I was trying to do, and get Spatial Studio to do all my data. But as I brought it in here and I've done it, I'm going to go and add that to the project. So the project currently just contains that shapefile map. So I'm going to go and add all my customers that I've now geocoded. So there's it's about 1,000 customers I've geocoded. Here they are. They're on here. It's brought that data set. It's brought that data set into the project. If I drag and drop that onto the shapefile, by default, it's now put all the customers down as separate circles. So every customer that it's got in that database and it geocoded now exists. I can visually see a nice representation of where they are, and I might want more than that. So what I can do here is look at the settings, and there's a smorgasbord of settings behind all of these layers once they're in there, to help us be able to view them in a sort of different visual style. So by default, it renders them as a circle, and the radius is a single value, so everything's given the same size and the same color. But if I go and change that style from circle to a cluster, automatically start to cluster those records together. So I can now see an interesting sort of distribution of, say, in the London area, I've got sort of 423, and then in the north of Scotland, I have there's much fewer there in a sort of grouping up there. And what's quite nice about this is as I sort of drill in and focus in on that, it'll sort of zoom into those clusters. So here, for example, I can start to see the distribution within a sort of a county boundary basis, which is quite a nice feature. Now we're going to just toggle away from clusters for a second and just go and change that to a heat map. So all I've done is change it from a circle to a cluster view, and now I've toggled it to a heat map, so I can start seeing a heat map version of it. And again, what's nice about that is as I sort of focus in and drill into that heat map and focus in, I can see like hotter spots within certain parts. So again, I am seeing here, there's up in the northeast, there's an interesting bit around Newcastle upon Tyne. The Midlands is looking quite interesting. There's quite a bit across the whole of the Midlands, and again, the southeast area is a very big hotspot for people by customers taking flights. Now we can change those to be symbols as well, and there's a whole bunch of symbols to choose from, and we're going to look at and a bit later how this is going to be quite useful to us to change them to have a symbolic representation of these things. But in this example here, I've just changed them to stars, made them black, and again, I've just done another one here as a bit of entertainment to make them to be use a veterinarian wants to put little sort of footprints on. But just showing how I can just sort of quickly go and change the style. If I flip it back to points, we can actually let some of the data do the talking for us. So rather to remove some sort of cognitive load that we've got, and to make some more use of the information we've actually got, we can start to do things by saying, let's leave it as a circle, or let's go and look and make the radius based on data, and the color based on data. And then behind that, what I've done is I've made it based on the behind the scenes that I made it based on the amount of spend. So the size of this, I'm going to change to the size of the circles, and the color of the circles is based on the data. So the deeper the color and the darker the color is the more spend. So I've got some small white circles up here, so where I'd be happy, and I've got some deeper, darker, but larger circles here. So I can start to get an even better visual view of these things just by toggling some of these things here. And actually, in 21.3, there's a nice new feature in here, which is whereby it's fluoropath mapping. So if there is a color-coded column in the data, then it can pick that up, and it can change the color based on the color that's in the data itself. So rather than doing it by me picking something, saying base it on this metric, it can actually, if you've got colors in the thing. So I've seen a great example that Carol's done with pipelines. So if you can have pipelines of different colors, then they can really sort of stand out. If you like have gas pipelines and the pipelines of different types, they can really sort of stand out if you use that new feature. But it's not just a visualization tool either. It can actually do some analysis. So if I click on the filter tab here, I can say, well, actually show me where all the sales are over £900, for example. And that itself is then just going to reduce the amount of data I've got on the screen by that metric. So I can start to see I can do that sort of analysis here and interact with it without having to go out to another tool to do that. And if I just flip that back again, we can see all of our customers. So here's just the ones where it's over £900. I can see where they're distributed. And there's not very many in Scotland by the looks of it, and there's only one of them in Northern Ireland. And then if I put it back to see all the customers, I can see it's quite a busy chart. So doing that sort of filtering can be really useful to be able to cut down on the values. If I look at the settings here of this data set, so just look at the settings behind it. There's some really interesting things that it's done to that data set. So we got quite a nice sort of look at the metadata behind it. I can see, for example, that there's 967 rows, and it's also got a GeoJSON endpoint, which is an interesting kind of a feature. So this has only got a localhost 4040 because it's running localhost on my machine. I'm running the quick start one, But if, of course, you were running that in the cloud or somewhere else, you'd have a proper ID address for that. But I can go, I can still even I can go and interrogate that and get the GeoJSON endpoint, so I can get the whole I can see all of that and interact with that through GeoJSON. So and I get all the records. You can see all the records here, and I've just exploded the first one out, and that's showing me all the data that's for that first customer. So all my customers are in there, and I can use GeoJSON to interrogate those as well. That's another nice way of doing it. There's also this interactive window. So it isn't just the ability to see points. We can also show some of the information about it as well. So, for example, I've clicked here on the customer ID, the postcode, the sales, and flight date. So when I go and hover over those points now, I get to see that data, and then it's up to me to show as much or as little of that data as I really want to, that makes sense for what I'm actually trying to do. So I can see some interesting things about those. Now, whilst I geocoded that data set, and it geocoded it and created the column and everything, I can still do some reverse geocoding. So there's a really nice little feature here, actually, whereby if I use the magnifying glass, I can start to type in an address. So I type in 8 Buckinghamshire Road, which is the address I lived at about 20 years ago. And it puts out anything that starts with that. So I'm going to go and pick the one that's actually here in Belmont in Durham. And then that will put a pin in the map for that address. So I can sort of see, if there were some specific things or some incidents or something happening, I wasn't quite sure it was, I could type an address in, and it's going to put a pin in for me for where that is, which is a really, really cool feature. But I can also now in 21.3 as well, I can drop a pin in a map. So it's kind of the other way around. I can right-click geocode. So rather than me typing an address in and seeing where that address is, I might have a feature of interest or a town of interest or place of interest, just drop a pin on it, and I can just right-click and drop a pin, and that'll drop a pin on the map there, and then give me the geocoded data for the place where I've dropped the pin. So I might want to say, there might be something visually I'm looking at saying, well, that's interesting here. I wonder what this, if I drop a pin to say the center point of that, make it, I might go and do something there, have an event here. Where is that? I'll just drop a pin into it, and then go and do something back later on. It's just another extra facility that is there for me. Now, the data I put in there was customers taking flights and spending money over a period of time. Now, because we've got the data in there, we can look at things on a time-by-time basis. So we don't look at all of our customers as a holistic collective. We can look at them how they're interacting with us over a period of time, because it might be that we have peaks and troughs over time, and that might be quite evident in a visual style if you have a look at it. So there's a little feature at the top here. If I click on the sort of cog, I get an option to put in a time slider. So I can put the time slider in on that view. And it says, when I do that, obviously I have to pick a temporal column, and in here, and there might be a number of temporal columns, so you can flip between them if you've got several of them. This one here, I've only got one column, which is the flight date. So I'll just pick that, and I'll do it so I can have a range of dates as well as showing a specific date. Now, if I do that, what it lets me do is on the map here, I've got a little time slider, so I can say, well, on the 8th of the 11th, they're the people taking the flights. Yeah, there's quite a few here. Actually, the ones in London, there weren't that many, but it seems to be quite a few up in Scotland taking flights on that day. So I can pick any date I've got and have a look at it, or I can even do a range of dates. So here's my range of dates between these two dates here. I can see all the people who've interacted with us on that range of dates there as well. So we're doing some quite interesting things here, because we're going to do some analysis now. But just being able to interact with that front end you can see how useful that could be, just to visually and spatially look at that data without doing any analysis. But let's have a look at the customers in the Southwest. If we wanted to look quickly at all of our customers in the Southwest, who are they? If I ask that as a SQL question, that could be a bit tricky to write that if I just had that data. How do I identify all of those? Now, because I got this, because I put that shapefile map on, And if you built your own shapefile map, you've got some other shapefile maps from somewhere else, you might have to do some, some cleansing with them. But I've got all my customers and they're on top of this shapefile here. What I can do is I can try an analysis that's going to show the interaction between the customers and the shapefile, and I can do that without coding anything. But we have the benefit of seeing the coding behind us. So I think just like was like previously mentioned, we can create things that are like it. We can look and see how it's done. That'll give us some ideas of how we can actually use that in other products. So let's go and have a look and see if we can see all of our customers in the Southwest region. So the way I'm going to do that is I go to the top and go and click it on create a new analysis. I want to click on new analysis. Now don't be shocked at the next page, because there's a lot of analyses that we can do. And they're split into different types of sort of filtering, measurements, different sorts of things. And this just shows us, and it's quite a nice thing to have a look through and see the sorts of different analyses that we can do, because it gives you quite a range of things that interact with each other and how they interact with each other. We're going to pick a couple of these out to create some new data sets. So if I'm just looking at the filter ones, if I want to see the customers in the Southwest, I've had a look at all of these and I thought, well, I think the way to do it is return shapes that are inside another. So the shape I've got is that Southwest shape, part of my background. And I've got the customers who are sort of on top of that. So I'm going to say, right, show me all the shape, show me all the customers that are in the selected part of my shape. And that's telling me it's going to use the SDO inside clause to do that. So I give this thing a new name, my new analysis, all my customers in the Southwest. I give it a new name, and I'm going to call it Southwest Customers Only. And I'm simply saying, what layer am I going to filter? Well, the layer I'm going to filter is the customers, and which customer, which ones am I going to filter it by? I'm going to do it by the background map. And it says, oh, and I've selected the Southwest, so it's only going to include the customers in which that the part of the map I've selected is. Yeah. So if I selected this part of the map here, that's highlighted as selected. So when I go and say, show me all the customers that are within that part of the map, press run, it's going to create me a new data set. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide everything else on the map, because it's quite nice to have a little filters to be able to hide things. I'm going to hide those on the map that was there. So I'm going to clean that. All the customers are just hidden. Now I've got this new analysis of Southwest Customers Only. And I'm just going to drag that across. And when I drag and drop that on the map, that shows me all the customers. That data set is showing me all the customers that are just in the Southwest. So by doing that, creating that new analysis, that has just got all those customers. And we can have a look at that. We can have a look at those, because if I go and have a look at that data set behind it, it's showing me there's 95 records here. So there's 95 customers just in the Southwest. And here's the SQL that is used to do that. Yeah, I've got a GeoJSON endpoint with it, but there's all the customers. There's a SQL. And I can cut and paste that SQL. So if I take that bit of SQL, you can see that it's using this SDO inside clause at the bottom. If I go and take that SQL and I go and put it, I can go and put it into SQL Developer. I can go and run that against I could go and run that against the table that I've created. And there's the 95 customers. So just by using SQL Studio, it's generated the code for me to do that sort of analysis, which I find is really useful. And there you can see it's using the SDO inside functionality to do that against those two data sets. Now, if I remove that analysis now, yeah, let's kind of go back to where we were. So we've got all of our customers. So I'm just showing all of our customers again. I've highlighted the Southwest, but that doesn't really matter. I'm just showing all the customers. And I'm going to bring in the offices. So remember, I said we've got some offices, some which are basically the airports that Scampi uses. I'm going to bring those in. I'm not going to show you the geocoding of all that, because it's exactly the same. But we've got about eight different offices, eight different places where we can take flights from around the UK. So I'm just going to load that data up and stick it on the project. So I've put them on as blue planes. I put them on as airfields as blue planes. I've got all the customers, and here's all my airfields. And what I can do here is say, well, how about we create an offer? We create an offer for the northeast, this northeast airfield here, and say, let's take the 50 closest customers to the northeast airbase, yeah, and give them a special party. So how can I quickly find the 50 customers who are closest to the northeast airbase? Well, here's one. So looking at all the different options I've got for all these templates and analysis operations, there's a great one here called nearest neighbors. So it's return shapes nearest to another. So I'm going to return all the shapes, all the customers that are nearest to the northeast airbase. So I click on that, and again, I'm just filling in a little template here. I'm going to call it Northern Special 50 Neighbors. So what am I going to filter? Well, again, I'm going to filter all my customers, yeah. And what am I going to filter it by? Well, I'm going to filter it by one of the by the highlighted northeast office that I've just highlighted. So if I do, and I'll say I'm going to have 50 of those. So I could do 100, the closest 100 or the closest 5. I'm going to click the closest 50. Run that in the background, and then what I've done is I've just put that layer on top there, the little stars, so you can see next to the northeast one, there's lots of little stars all around the place. So it's on top of the existing customers, and I drag that layer across, and it's highlighted all the 50 closest ones to that airfield, and that's all I've had to do. And if I go and hide the other layers that I've got. So I go and hide the layer that has all the other customers on it, and just show the layer that is the 50 that are closest to the northeast. And I turn them into little black stars, as they really do sort of stand out on that map, because we've seen how easy it is for us to change the look and feel of things. That I can now see all of those 50. Now, what I do notice I am doing is my eyes are sort of roaming around that picture, seeing, well, I've got some down the bottom and some over here and some up there. What might be nice to do is me to put a nice little shape around that, so I can encapsulate all of those into one logical area, so it's easier for us to see where they all are. What I could do there is, again, I'm going to do the third and final thing here. I'm going to ring fence all of my customers, so I can create another shape here, which is a combination shape, which is to use something that I would think sounds quite complicated for a novice, which is the aggregated convex hull, but it's really nicely defined here. Is create a rubber band around the shapes. So that's what I want to do. I want to create a rubber band around the shapes. So what am I doing again? It's a lovely template. The rubber band is no more than, give it a new name. I'm going to call it a ring fence. But what we're going to do? Well, I want to ring fence all of my neighbours. So the results of the last analysis I did was showing the 50 neighbours closest to the northeast. Put a ring fence around those, and I'm going to create a new one called Northeast Ring Fence. And what that's going to do is create me a new data set and drag it across here, and it's drawn me that. So I can now see all of those. So I can now see, well, I can't really see them very well, but what I could do is, because it's just got these lovely little ways of being able to edit everything, I could go and change the opacity of it. I can make them stand out. I'll make it yellow. So I can now see where all my customers are. Now, I can have a look at the code it's done behind that again to see how it's done that layer. And what's really quite nice about that is if I look at it, it's really saying, let's do that convex hull, yeah. And what I want to do, what it's doing there is it's basically saying, look at all my detail table, and it's doing the nearest neighbours of some point we're going to pivot about. So what it's actually done is there's kind of a nested analytic that it's done there. So it said, show me my 50, work out what my 50 nearest neighbours are, and then draw me a hull, or then draw me a diagram around that, draw me that polygon around that. So I can take that code and go and use it somewhere else. So an example I've got here is I put it into Oracle Apex, and there's the code in Apex. So you'll see here, use convex hull, nearest neighbours, and around a geo point. If I go and take that code and go and use it in Apex, Yeah, I can pretty much use that code against the tables that I've got in my Apex system. And the one I'm going to toggle to, and I've only got a few minutes left. The one I'm going to toggle to is where I can actually put a flexible number in there. So I don't put 50 in. I can put whatever number I want. But within Apex, it's going to do exactly that. So using Carsten's fantastic example in Apex 21 of the spatial thing, I've taken that a little bit, use that as a basis, and take that a little bit further to be able to use that pin drop. Wherever I'm dropping a pin, it's using that pin drop. So it's using this command here for the pin drop. If I drop my pin, to work out what the nearest 10 neighbors are, flag them, and then draw that convex hull around that. That is the only code I'm using. But the place I got that code was the template that I got from Spatial Studio. So we'll have a look at that, hopefully, if we've got a minute. But what I can do here is, where we created that north special 50 neighbors, just the 50 neighbors, I can export that to a new table. So we created that as a new data set, completely new data set within Spatial Studio. I can go and click on that data set and do a save as. So I'm going to call it, if I call it save as, I'm going to call it Scampers Northeast People, because it's Scampy's thing. Yeah. I go do a query from that. You'll see it's got 50 records in here. So I've got 50. It's saved the 50 records into a new table into my autonomous warehouse with a geocoded column, which lets me do another little nice little feature, actually, which is you do the get vertices, so I can actually see the X and Y columns. And if I do that, I can use that directly in Oracle OAC. Currently, I don't believe Oracle OAC will natively consume that geometry column. But if I turn it into a get vertices and have the X and Ys, it can consume the lat and longs. So I could use that in Oracle OAC just by writing that little bit, by just doing that select from that table with that get vertices to get the X and Y columns. And then I can start to look at that data in OAC. So if I wanted to show me, the top 10s, or drill in some detail, or, do any sort, or bring in some other data from some other data sources, because I might have customers who have been, I've got about some more data about the customer feedback forms and what sort of feedback I got from my customers. And I can bring that here, and I can look at that interactively in OAC quite quickly. And yet all that data has been sourced entirely from the work that I've done within Spatial Studio. So if a summary for it, I would say Spatial Studio is, I don't like people like me who read exactly the stuff from the slide, but it is really excellent for manipulating, creating a subset of data that would be more challenging to do otherwise. So if I had to find of all my customers, where are they, and which ones are the closest to my northeast base, and then kind of go, give them an offer, I could do that really quickly within Spatial Studio. And I could create a great story. And there's some brilliant blogs with these two links here, and there's the analytics blog as well, which is well worth checking out. So in summary, that's kind of me finished, I think, really. And if we want to, we could go and look at those. To share a slightly different thing here. So if I have 1 second, this is the Apex application I've got, and this is, hopefully you can see my little Apex app here, and wherever I'm clicking on here, it's highlighted. It's creating that. I'll zoom in a little bit. It's creating that convex hull, and wherever I'm clicking, it's picking out those customers here. It's picking out the number of neighbors I've got 10, so it's picking out the closest 10 neighbors to that. Just using that code that I got from basically the work that we did within Spatial Studio, and yet that's how it can work within Apex. So I think that's me wrapping up with that for the moment.
Okay, we've got a couple questions, so I think they're going to be answered by the product management team on the panel, so they're not related to your presentation, Mark. This was excellent. I learned something today. I like that bit of SQL for the vertices off of a geometry column. I'm going to be using that in the future. So it's always great when I learn something. Again, thank you, Mark, for your excellent presentation. We have